Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And it is the happiest of Halloweens.
Happy Halloween, one and all.
So we are here on Halloween day or night, or whenever you'll listen to it, sometime around Halloween, or maybe it's the next year or the following year after that. Time works in a crazy way. You might be listening to us in 50 years when we're both buried and dead.
Yeah, maybe 1,000 years. But, everything's just in space.
Maybe we are the only part of media that survived.
Yeah.
We are seen as an amazing civilization. And to Halloween there's a planet called Halloween.
And obviously a religion called the Epo Files that worship this ginger creature that we call Epo.
That once lived.
Yes.
And then slain his enemies.
Yes. So obviously today we are going to be doing a beginner's guide to horror, which we're kind of approaching in potentially different ways. But before we kind of talk a bit about the episode, go and make sure to join us around the campfire as we release our little Halloween tradition of our Campfire Stories. And as always, thank you for listening, and remember to hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. Now, Beginner's Guide to Horror. Yeah, again, whenever we do these episodes, we kind of leave it vague so we can come up with our own interpretations of it. What did you see as a beginner's guide to horror?
Well, I mean, these guides, I mean, this has kind of become a little bit part of our Halloween thing now, to kind of give people recommendations. Like our first one was like alternative kind of thing. And like last year's was family friendly for those getting around with the family. So that one, I guess, somewhat slightly might link, but it's a little bit earlier than we were approached. So I wasn't going for like young, because we'd done family friendly horror. But I'm literally just going with horror films. I think anyone can a beginner for me is a horror film that anyone could kind of come into, even if they're not a horror fan, they might enjoy it. Or if you want to show someone a horror films for the first time. Now, I think there were a lot of areas I thought of in here, and I was like, well, if I'm showing the first horror, I'm probably going proper classics. Kind of thing. But I ended up avoiding, because we've pretty much talked through the main classics I think that I would show. Your Texas Chainsaws, your Screams, your Nightmare on Elm Street, your Aliens. I avoided that kind of stuff because I was like, we've done it. So I've gone for ones that when I was younger, I think I was first watching kind of horror, the ones that kind of might have drawn me in. But I think I've gone quite light with mine. Mine are kind of quite light horror films, to be honest. They're horror films, but they might be kind of a bit tongue-in-cheek or a bit humorous. I think that's where I've gone with mine. What about you? How have you approached yours?
So naturally, whenever we do these, we allow ourselves to have one from each genre. So I've tried to do a variety of genres that you can kind of do to show people what's about. I've done kind of one about classic horror, so something that people may be familiar with, but in a different way. I did do one of the big hitters. I tried to not do anything that we've covered recently. Over on when I asked this when we go to the social media lounge, there were a lot that, like you said, like Scream, for instance, which we spoke about quite a bit. We did a whole episode of Scream, but it got lost. There was Poltergeist that came up, but obviously we just covered that. So I tried to stay away from ones that we've covered recently, but I've kind of done ones that are easily accessible and kind of show the horror genre in an extremely positive light, are really easy to watch, and show everything that we love about horror and makes a great horror film. So saying that, who's got to start?
Who's starting? If we get the bullets, one remaining, let's get our roulette on.
Let's get our roulette on, man. Who's starting?
You start.
I'll start.
You
go
first.
So
I'm intrigued by your descriptions.
So I thought I'll go for one which is a big hitter. Now, this is a classic. I think if I was pushed into a corner and asked my favorite horror film, like if you're like me, you're somebody who loves horror. I wear a lot of t-shirts with graphics from horror films on, or horror posters, that kind of stuff. So a lot of times people say, "Oh, what's your favorite horror film?" And it's really hard, and I don't just want to sit there and go, "Well, actually," now you mentioned that, it depends, and kind of get into it. So my go-to that I kind of always say is Nightmare on Elm Street. 1984. I think it is such a classic from the horror film. In terms of film itself, it's got everything that makes a horror classic. So we've got an amazing and iconic villain in Freddy Krueger, and it's before he got a bit too comedic for my liking.
Yeah, a bit too tongue-in-cheek kind of thing.
Thinking, if you showed kind of maybe Dream Child or something like that, people will probably think it's a bit shit. But the original is a classic. You've got great characters, obviously, Heather Langenkamp's Nancy, Johnny Depp, Glenn, and then everyone's favorite sexual man, John Saxon. It's got some really kind of iconic and horrifying kills. So if you think about Tina's death and Glenn's death in particular, being sucked through the bed, the kind of iconic, the scary, the tense, but they're not laden with blood and gore. I mean, Glenn's death is bloody, it's kind of like a waterfall of blood, but you don't see him really dying. It's a shocking death and it's quite gruesome, but you don't see a whole lot. So it's
no, you don't. You're right. It's when I think of the original, it's interesting to think about it from our perspective. I guess we saw it a lot younger, and it might have worked a little bit better. And I know you showed this. This is one of the first horrors you show to Anna.
Yes, I showed this to Anna.
Yeah.
She hated it.
Yeah, that's what I did. But because then it's hard to say because certain things are outdated. I think I remember showing it to Charlotte and she was kind of like, I think she preferred the remake and thought that was scary. But that's purely, I think, because it just you're either used to the way these films look or you're kind of thinking, well, that one, it just looked a bit too fake for me or things like that, which I don't think. I think some of the scenes in the original, like Tina's and Glenn's, are still stand up completely.
Well, yeah.
But I think it just is about that there is still a little bit of a corniness at times to Freddy in that first one.
Yeah.
So I understand the difference there. But yeah, for a beginner, I'd say, it does now seem it is slightly tamer, even than some of the sequels.
Yeah, definitely.
Where it goes in Dream Warriors and stuff like that, where you have a lot more special effects, therefore a lot more of limbs and parts being pulled apart and muscles showing. And so this one's definitely, and it's quite a slow burn kind of film.
Yeah,
it's not as quick through the deaths as some people think.
No, it's nowhere near as quick as kind of the later ones. And there are some great scenes. You've got Tina when she's in the body bag in the school and that dream sequence. You've got Tina kind of being chased. You've got the bath scene. There's loads of kind of iconic scenes in it, and it's a really easy one to watch. There's some great gore moments as well, like Freddy cutting his finger off when his face gets ripped off. So it's kind of it's fun, but it's an iconic film, but it's not it's not overly artsy. It's not overly gory. It's
Craven's never that artsy.
No, but it's kind of I think if you wanted to show somebody who doesn't really like horror, something like say Midsummer, or The Witch, or The Lighthouse, where they've got to sit for 2.5
too rich for their blood.
Too rich for their blood.
It definitely would. This is a easy, straightforward. This is why in some ways I would show certain.
You right?
Certain. You're midway for an episode. That's why I would show that's why I did say there were certain classic. I did avoid them because but to be honest, things like Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween, things like that, like Halloween being a basically suspenseful but bloodless affair. So it'll be scary for someone, but it's not going to completely gross them out. For me, a beginner's I'm not gonna stick on Saw and go watch them get torn apart if they say they don't like horror films. That's not going to make them like horror films more. That's just going to make them go, fuck this, I'm not watching it.
Yeah.
And even actually I said classics before and I named Texas Chainsaw, but I'd even say Texas Chainsaw because I know for a fact with people who don't like horror films that is not a film to get them into horror films. In fact, I think anyone I showed it to, it had the opposite effect and they didn't want to watch them for several years. So Texas Chainsaw definitely not a beginner's, but there's a playfulness and a funness to Nightmare on Elm Street that I think pulls you in it, and it's a little bit more creative, but it also doesn't go too far into the dreamlands and stuff like that in this first one. So you can follow it quite clearly. It's not trying to be too far out there.
That was my kind of thinking behind that. It isn't, as much as I love Halloween, and some people watching it, and it's an all-time classic, and that would be what I could potentially recommend. But I think sometimes people see a horror film or a slasher film in particular, and I was always going to have a slasher film on this list. People might just be like, "Oh, it's a man in a mask that kills people," So I think going with something that all does kind of follow a slasher template, but has a bit of playfulness to it, a bit more of a hook with the dreams, I thought is a good way to kind of kick it off to get somebody into horror. So that's my first one.
Yeah. So, as I said, with my choices, there's definitely one that I'm flip-flopping whether to go for more of a classic or whether to stick with what I feel is a theme going through mine. But sticking with the slasher genre, although slightly bending other genres. And I think it was on, and this is what film's been on one of your lists before in the past, but I have gone for my beginner's film. My first one is Happy Death Day.
Yeah, banging film.
Happy Death Day, I think, and this is kind of right through me, I think if you're introducing someone to horror films, you kind of want it to be something, one that it's a little bit into maybe touching on other genres, that it starts to make them feel like, well, yeah, I'd watch a sci-fi film, or I'd watch Groundhog Day. Yeah. So I'd watch a comedy, and I'd watch a comedy horror, and this one pushes that line between comedy horror and, horror, but while having an odd sci-fi twist to it.
Yeah.
Now the genre I'm going this is the slasher. I mean, this is my slasher choice because I do have a sci-fi choice, so I'd be crossing the boundaries. But this one is mixing several in one.
Yeah.
Happy Death Day, if you don't know, from 2017. It is about basically a college girl who continues to relive the same day again and again and again. But each day, she finds that she is being killed by a masked baby. It's kind of a baby-like mask, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a little baby Cupid.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Cherub in Valentine.
Yeah.
And we have that same repeating every day. And every time she tries to change something, the killer still managed to kill her in a different way, or she accidentally kills herself in some way, or she just starts killing herself because she's tired of reliving the same day again and again and again. It's made by Christopher Langdon, and I remember going to the cinema having no expectations for this film with like Charlotte, and Charlotte's not exactly a big like horror fan at all.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect anything, but it's just a fun ride. It's as I said before, Groundhog Day meets Scream, I guess, or something like a slasher kind of thing. And it's just that kind of film that you can just sit there and you watch. And because it's not really full of blood or anything like that. The deaths are quite like quick cut. They're the kind of ones that kind of cut out on you, which as you become more and more infested with bloodlust as a horror fan, you start to be, at times, some of those kind of films make you go a bit like, I want to see, I want to see a bit more than that. And that's why I think this one's kind of a perfect kind of get someone into it, because you've got this kind of like teen kind of drama, like and it also skewers that. It skewers that kind of, I don't know, I was going to say the OC, and suddenly I was like, wait, that's a really old reference now. Gossip Girl, a little bit closer, the remake of the Gossip Girl. But it skewers those kind of but it makes you think that it's one thing and that you're going to get this teen horror, but it's so massively like changes your perception. It is just like Groundhog Day and Bill Murray. It's that same thing of this horrible character.
Oh yeah, she's an arsehole
who completely changes going through this, but it adds that nice layer of the fact that she gets more and more trauma. So she literally, her body is actually, so the difference is each day she's feeling it more. So she is in more pain. So she's still alive, and yet she's feeling that. And it does give an out where she starts to realize that there is the possibility she is going to possibly die, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's all kind of played into the story really nicely. We have things like, like a kind of a love interest who's the guy who she wakes up within the room each morning. But we do also have a nice whodunit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a whodunit there.
We get loads of red herrings throughout the film. We do get some different kind of death of like some other characters and things like that, but it's not many, because we get so much death with the lead character that it almost sustains you that you don't actually need that many other deaths throughout the film. With other, like, there's not really many at all. I think there's one other death.
I don't think
throughout the film. There is obviously the sequel, Happy Death Day to You, which that one involves a bit more death because it plays on the sci-fi way more. which is also a fun ride. If you like the first one, then go and check out the second one.
I need to watch it again because I watched it and I really wasn't, I wasn't really into it. So I want to give it another go.
I think it is because it does skewer more into the I think I partly liked it just because it had a sequence, and like in the first film we have this really cool like montage of deaths of her, and then in the sequel it does the same thing again, but it does it over Paramore's hard times. And I don't know, there was so catchy about it, but also the way that they invent like new ways for her to die in this kind of montage again.
Yeah.
Yes, it feels a little bit like retread, but it was fun to watch. I found them not as good as the original, but it's still kind
strong,
of a fun remake. So yeah, I think that this film, if you don't like blood or gore, it's not going to bother you. And if you are someone who just kind of likes that kind of like I don't know, like high school, you'd kind of feel like you'd be more into that kind of slasher genre, like kind of fun teen kind of thing. This is probably the most fun you're going to have watching someone die.
And it would pair well with Freaky as well.
Yeah, it does. It would pair well with Freaky. Freaky would be a very good choice as well. Yeah, I didn't think of that one, but that would be a very good choice. Yeah, that's my first one.
So I've gone for another. It is a classic, but it's more of I want to say a modern day classic, but it's kind of the last 20 years. And that is Shaun of the Dead. An absolute classic.
There you go. I know what other film I'm choosing now.
It was on my
list.
Awesome, man. I mean, I was always going to put a zombie film on the list. Because zombies are a staple in the horror genre and in pop culture themselves. So kind of everybody is familiar with them. And everybody kind of has certain expectations of Shaun of the Dead, of zombie films, you know. And then Shaun of the Dead kind of flips it all. You've got a brilliant cast, which is kind of made up from I would say like the underground of British early 2000s TV. I can't name all of them, but obviously you've got Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, but then you've got a whole bunch of other people.
Those you mean like Black Books?
The guy from Black Books, Space.
That was another Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright who made the film.
Edgar Wright,
those kind of films. Yeah,
kind
all
of,
that Channel 4. It was Channel 4.
Late night
Channel 4. It was the peak of
stuff.
Channel 4. It was the years of Father Ted, Black Books, Space.
Yeah.
Any nerds out there who know that genre know that they are class. I've rewatched some of those. Well, not so much Space. I was never actually a bigger fan of that one, but some of the other ones that have like Dylan Moran, who's in this film,
Dylan Moran
in Black Books. I fucking love that show.
Yeah, he's awesome. And Bill Bailey's in this film.
He is not as big as he should have been. He's been good in everything I've seen.
And his comic timing is just incredible.
I know, that's what I mean. He should have been bigger than he was. He kind of disappeared off. I think he had issues.
it is a goat kind of horror comedy. It's all time classic.
It's worldwide. Like it made Simon Pegg and Nick Frost stars. It made Edgar Wright the director he is today. It was a class. It is a classic. It is because it's not just because it skewers a genre. I remember because this was released the same year as Dawn of the Dead remake. So I remember getting really confused because I knew more about the horror part, but I knew more about like Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds awesome. Like I'm going to watch that. I remember watching on TV and someone on like an interview saying, and later on we'll be interviewing for Shaun of the Dead. And I remember being like, that you're wrong. It's called Dawn of the Dead, dickhead. I was like, I'm the dickhead. I'm wrong. I remember walking into cinema and being like, oh shit, that's what Shaun of the Dead is.
I'd
literally never heard of it until I literally saw it on a poster in the cinema. I was like,
and the poster was amazing. It was it was all of the zombies outside of like a phone box or something like that.
Coming through like the hand.
Yeah,
I think it's coming through the door. I think it was made to look a little bit almost like the cinema kind of doors.
Yeah.
So it looks like they're coming round and through the doors. It's that classic kind of.
Yeah, I kind of remember it. But I mean, you're trying to think of what could you put. You could put, Dawn of the Dead, because zombie films are kind of classic. But I think somebody who's not into horror, into zombie films in particular, might this is a pun, might groan at the thought of watching a zombie film. But the fact that it does twist things, and you've got some classic scenes, too many to mention. One of them is, the opening scene where Sean's going to the shop, and then we get that kind of parodied again when the zombie outbreak starts.
The red pen on his
red
top.
On you.
You got red on you.
The scene where they go and get his mum and Philip, and they keep going over their plan, and then they say, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," and then the "Don't Stop Me Now" montage, absolute classic. And it's so British. and it's so Edgar Wright in its delivery that it's one of those films which there's just so many bangers there, and it's not kind of it's not played like a comedy film, if that makes sense. You know, there's kind of a strange seriousness about it. Which kind of makes it
mixing with the comedy, like quite a lot of the comedy does go. It's not like they're totally play out. Quite a lot of the comedy comes from the British kind of like lad humor that you get between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost is obviously one comedy part.
Yeah.
But you've also got this kind of obliviousness to life, which is where the comedy comes from. It is those scenes when they're just like walking across the street and behind them someone's getting their head ripped off, or they're on the bus and someone's literally in the middle of like a park getting torn apart and they're just like not noticing it, and you're kind of only spotting it in the background to start with, and you know, it's that building, you know what I mean? It's
and then, you know, when they calls him something like a pissed up nutter, and you know, it's great, but like when they're in the pub and you know Sean's just been broken up with, and you know, he's kind of trying to cheer him up, and they say like, you know, that's time. And then there's like the zombie hand on the door. It's just so well done.
It is. It's also, I've loved the way that at the beginning of the film, it plays out basically later on. We play out very similar scenes to what his life was like before and after this kind of full on now zombie invasion. So it's literally, it's one that I know is worldwide loved kind of thing. Yeah. It's one of those times when British comedy, although big, like really like hits it into the, you know, it's like, no, 4 Weddings and a Funeral where Hugh Grant became like a fucking megastar because of a British comedy. This was that for them, but it's also, it literally, I do think we have some great British comedies, but this is the best British horror comedy for me.
Oh yeah,
it's timeless to watch. In the UK, it's probably been played so much. It's probably at the point where some people are like, I think I'd seen it so many times. I was like, I can't watch this again because I've watched this film so much. It is a great heart. I mean, to be like this one, and I do also love into slasher. I do love Hot Fuzz as well.
I love Hot Fuzz.
Great. World's End, it's good in some ways, but I don't love it as much as I do.
I think World's End is my favourite.
Really?
Yeah, strangely, I don't know why. I love the sci-fi-ness. I think it's
much more of a sci-fi than a horror. Yeah, one, obviously.
The cast is incredible. Yeah, it you know, Edgar Wright's writing, say that fast, is you know, it's so well crafted by that point, you know, and you've got Paddy Considine in there, and you've just got so many.
I do like it. I definitely. I didn't feel that the film plays out like fully as well for me. Like all of the plot points didn't quite work as well for me by the end of the film.
Fair enough.
But I definitely, but I do think the whole trilogy, it's still a class trilogy.
Yeah,
the Cornetto trilogy.
And one thing before we move on from Shaun of the Dead is that there is a lot of times when, you know, people who aren't into horror, they don't like extreme amount of gore, and that's what I've tried to stay away from. But in this film,
there is
you know, a throwback to Day of the Dead. There is a really gory death of Dylan Moran's death, where he, you know, gets dragged out of the window, torn apart, gutted, you know.
Yeah.
And the rest of the film is relatively tame. But then that death is just, it's so brutal, and it's so
obviously,
hard.
as this is a beginner's guide, I guess, and people listening, if you're looking for recommendations, just don't Google the names we're saying, because most of them are just the actors and not the thing, and you won't know who's dying.
But you know, it's just, even that scene has something hilarious on its own, where, you know, his girlfriend, you know, Dawn from The Office, picks up his leg and tries to run out looking for him. It's just, you know, it's just incredible.
It's such a good film. It's such an easy film to watch. I do think that there are lots of people out there who don't like horror films who've watched that film.
Yeah,
you know, who will get into that film because it is just so funny and relatable. You know.
Yeah. Let's see what, because obviously you had that. So what are you going to replace that with?
You see, my mind goes between two, but I had either another zombie film or I have like a very classic horror film.
Scooby-Doo.
And I'm very Scooby-Doo. Yeah, exactly. Very classic horror film. But I feel like with the rest of my list, I'm gonna stick with a theme. I will reveal at the end what my classic one was, but I'm gonna stick with the, as I said, a little bit more lighthearted, gets you into it. It's within the genre, but it's also, you could also kind of go out of it kind of thing. And I'm going to go with Zombieland.
Okay. That's
Ruben Fleischer. Yes, Zombieland. So, I remember absolutely adoring this film when I watched it in the cinema the first time. I remember it just being some of the funniest. Like it's not a long film. It's about 90 odd minute film.
Yeah, it's not long.
It's a tight film, but in it, it's got Woody Harrelson at the top of his game. He is so fucking good at this film as the kind of badass, and we've got. I'm suddenly just blanked on his name. Jesse Eisenberg. There you go. Yeah, there it's come back to me. Yeah. Jesse Eisenberg. And again, he is our narrator who we follow the film, throughout the film. But the way that they come up, this is for me like Shaun of the Dead is our British great, but I think this is another great kind of zombie horror comedy kind of thing. It's not. I'd say Shaun of the Dead is a more of a full-on comedy than this one is, but they're both comedy in different ways. This is kind of like the Americans' way of doing alternative horror comedy kind of thing. It's kind of much more theirs, but the whole system with the rules and the way they play it, the kill of the week or the kill of the month kind of thing. Yeah, that whole parts where you've got like the kill this week goes to, and it's like it's in the hay, and it's like the shredder going through, or you've got the piano drops on the head. That's a great one. Or you've got what's his name? He's a director who actually makes a cameo. In fact, he's Mike White. He was in School of Rock. He does do acting stuff as well. He was like Dewey's flatmate in School of Rock.
I can't even. I know. I can see him. But
he's like the.
Oh, he's the guy. You
see him in two separate scenes, and it's these little things that I think are really clever because it's really like the way it's shot. I just think is so cool. Like the opening heavy metal kind of where we've got like the zombies bursting through and they're showing all the different way people are killing them, but you've also got like a mother like beating away her children, or you've got like another like woman with two like full-on machine guns just blasting. It's just like balls to the wall kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's full on with its kind of Emma Stone before she kind of went huge kind of thing. This was one of the ones Superbad was one of the ones that
So Superbad, and then this, and then kind of Easy A, and then eventually Spider-Man.
And she got Spider-Man, and then she started becoming like a full-on dramatic actress as well. So
more power to her.
All those kind of up before. I think she won an Oscar for La La Land, I think. So she did all of that kind of thing. So, but she's also great. She's she was good. She's always been good at that sarcastic kind of humor, and although her and Jesse Eisenberg don't make not conventional in your mind, there's something sweet about that. Also, if you're an Amber Heard hater, she gets killed at the start of this film.
Oh yeah, she does, doesn't she?
She is his flatmate who he's in love with kind of thing. He's like the loner, constantly talking about like the drink, like the Red Zero kind of Mountain Dew and having a night in, and he's like basically a recluse in a way kind of thing. He's not a full on, but he basically avoids anyone except for the girl next door, which is Amber Heard.
I didn't know it was Amber Heard. It's really weird because with Amber Heard, she's like, there's films where she's in, and I'm like, I completely forgot you were in that. She was in All the Boys Love Mandy Lane. And then she was in John Carpenter's The Ward. And she just seems to be like in these films.
She was in what time was 7 Days she was in? She was in Pineapple Express, which is different. She was like Seth Rogen's girl, like not underage, but like young girlfriend kind of thing. And that was kind of the joke of the film, that she like the stoner has this like high school girlfriend. But she was in that, and she also looked like, I don't know why, but when she's younger, she looked almost very different to the way she looks now. When I look at her, I don't know why. She's still blonde. She's still very. There's just a look about her that's just changed.
I imagine her. I remember her. This is really weird, and it's a bit of a tangent, but I remember her looking more like I think it might be Eliza Cuthbert, who was in the House of Wax. remake. For some reason, I always think that she looks like her.
She was literally in a film called The Girl Next Door.
The Girl Next Door,
which was quite a good film.
She did the porn film. You touched that film. I saw you.
And what? I don't know.
To make sure you're doing it right.
That would have been released right at the peak of our manner. So this is every chat. I don't know. What doesn't make you whack it back then?
Exactly. Just whack it.
I don't know. But it has, but the nice thing is it's got this kind of family aspect as well to it, where these like kind of loners and losers kind of come together to make this little family. You've got quite emotional scenes such as like Woody Harrelson, like there's a reveal that comes midway through where you realize that the whole film, it says he's talking about his dog and you realize it's not his dog. And also there is a class Bill Murray cameo.
Yeah, Bill Murray, that's awesome.
The Bill Murray one's great. Relives like Ghostbusters, but also kills Bill Murray.
Yeah.
I'm going for that spoiler. But yeah, but he's also fully game for it. Like, it's great. There is and again, I've said another one that also has a second one, which is only a second one kind of thing, which is also good. It's not as good as the original, but it's a fun film again. But yeah, no, Zombieland, I think it's so easily accessible for anyone to watch. Yes, it's got blood and gore and like those scenes, but again, I don't know what it is about when you've got like a horror comedy that kind of makes it, it makes it suddenly as if it's not. It doesn't feel as harsh. They
balance it.
Yeah,
a lot of the times you'll get scenes of light tension, I'd say, in a horror comedy. You don't often get scenes that are absolutely terrifying. You get scenes that might be creepy or be quite tense, but then there's long periods of comedy.
Yeah, there is a balance that has to be made. Yeah. And there are also many horror comedies out there that fail that balance completely. I could mention the early scary movies and say how good those are. And again, those would be great beginners ones. But if I said the later ones, they're just basically adverts for other brands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that kind of balance that you get with those kind of films that some of them have taken so far. And there are some that legitimate tried to be a horror comedy and just failed because they just weren't good enough or weren't funny, or maybe they tried to be too dark and tried to be funny and they just couldn't balance the two out.
That's it. I mean, Scary Movie was one that I was considering, partly because a lot of people who don't like horror often don't like it because it's either too bloody and they say, I don't like violence, I don't like gore, or it's too formulaic there's too many tropes. There is it's always like somebody running and then falling over, girl with big tits who just dies, like token black guy, and the good thing about Scary Movie is it plays all of that up, and it kind of, the satire of it's more over the top than something like Shaun of the Dead or even Zombieland, but it works, as a kind of make fun of it. This is what horror movies are.
I will say one piece of advice with Scary Movie, though, for any of the people who've never seen like most horror films. If you are a beginner and you are listening to this, go like things to watch, and there are classics out there. One classic is Scream. Watch Scream before you watch Scary Movie, not the other way around, or it will never work for you. I know many people who've watched Scary Movie first and therefore can't take Scream seriously at all because of Scary Movie. Because Scary Movie is basically the same plot as Scream. They play it out. That they throw in some I Know What You Did Last Summer and things like that in there, but it's mainly just the plot of Scream.
It's mainly the plot
spoofed kind of thing. So yeah, definitely some of these ones, watch them in the right, watch the horror it's talking about, then maybe watch Scary Movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, before we go to our final picks, we will take a little foray over to the social media lounge. So obviously we post what episodes we're going to be doing, and then we get comments and we read them out. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at CMTH Podcast, all one word. So I put up about, what would you say are the most accessible and most easy films to introduce someone to the horror genre? So one of our listeners, Adam Holloway, one of the writers for Shiver, I believe, who we did an interview with before, and we've actually done 2 interviews with them. So check them out. See, he said, his partner had only ever seen The Others when he met her. I think we started off with Scream 1, and then she wanted to watch all the sequels in one night. 8 years later, she's asking me if we can watch Zombie Flesh Eaters, Cannibal Holocaust, and the Hostel trilogy. So
great choices. The Others is actually a very good shout. Nicole Kidman, like it's a tame, but it's like a gothic horror if you don't know what it is. But it is a gothic horror with a fantastic twist, and it's just a slowly creepy film.
It's awesome.
It is very cool. Again, I haven't watched that in many years, though. This is when I was this is the days of I believe we wanted to go, we had a group of friends, we wanted to go to the cinema, and we were going to go to the cinema to see Reign of Fire with school. Matthew McConaughey and dragons.
And Christian Bale.
Yeah, exactly. If you said now to me, there's a film coming out with Matthew McConaughey, Christian Bale, it has dragons that take over London, I would say that sounds like the greatest thing ever made.
And it was.
And back then, as a 12-year-old, you were like, this is going to be the greatest film of my life.
Yeah.
Even though I had no idea who Matthew McConaughey or Christian Bale were at that point, because neither of them were actually as big as they are now. But still, like, and that film is mixture of both some amazing scenes and some terrible bits, but it stands. But instead, we couldn't all go to the cinema to see that, so we ended up renting The Others, and it scared the shit out of most of us.
Oh man, it's horrid.
But even though it is very slow, so it's you've got to be used, get ready for it, because it's not exactly a quick film.
No, so
it's a slow burn.
And it's a classic. Anna hasn't watched it, so we're planning on watching it.
Yeah, and Scream, for me, that I didn't say it because we talked about it so much, but to be honest, for me, Scream is probably the ultimate beginner film. I just think it draws you in. It's fun, but it's also scary. It's got enough that it is bloody, but it's not too much. It's just the perfect balance.
Yeah. And then Will Doherty, I hope I pronounced that right, suggested The Burbs for horror comedy.
Well, Rob's looking at this on his phone, and all I can see was Splash.
Splash. Well, yeah.
So I was like, "Is it going to be Splash?"
Well, I said to Will, because I watched The Burbs for the first time last year, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and I said, is it a bit weird that Tom Hanks did a horror comedy, and then he sent me Splash. So yes, not surprising. We had Will Chick, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who said Gremlins. Some great gross moments and some genuine jumps.
That is a good first one.
Yeah, Phil Schroeder, because of the Santa monologue, and it also has its own rules, a lot like a lot of horror. Good. And then Bob Scott suggested The Lost Boys, Carrie, Child's Play, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then we had Amber T, rounding off, suggested more of a newer one that we watched together, Ready or Not. It's always good for newbies. Yeah. Fun, nice bit of gore, tense without being full of dread.
Good choices.
Really good choices there. However, for my last one, I've gone for a film that I absolutely love. It's kind of, I would say, the opposite of the first two films I said, which are both fun. Not to say this film's not fun, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that is Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola.
Celebrating its 40th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
So 30th.
The reason why, I don't know, it was 1992. So 40th, yeah. 30th? 30th, yeah.
30th, yeah.
30th. Yeah, I'm 30th.
I know, it's back in cinemas. This, it's going to be on in cinemas in the next couple of weeks.
Oh shit, we're going to watch it. I fucking love this film. That's, I didn't put that in my notes, but that's kind of what I would say about it. I think the idea of kind of an adaptation of classic Dracula, because a lot of people are familiar with Dracula as just as a horror icon and as a pop culture figure. So I think, it's got a great kind of cast of actors that kind of give it some gravitas, just off the top of my head, you got, Gary Oldman, who probably delivers one of the best performances as Dracula, up there to rival Bela Lugosi, and Christopher Lee, Anthony Hopkins, not too far off the back of Silence of the Lambs, I think.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves isn't exactly the best in it, but the whole film is kind of, it's filled with tension. You've got some amazing set pieces and beautifully designed sets and costumes, and an incredible kind of soundtrack, which is just brilliant. And the way in which I kind of put it was, it's almost a horror movie for people who kind of don't like horror. A lot of the times when you talk about horror movies, people who aren't into horror think of trashy stuff. They think of stuff like Saw, or particularly later Saws, where it's just people. It just
they tend to see the horror icons, so they'll think, it's that Jason, that hockey guy. They'll say things like that, and they'll only know like those ones, or things like Paranormal Activity, like things that are over done, that they're just like, oh, they were rubbish. I saw them and they were rubbish. Don't define me. Films.
Whereas this is, you've got an adaptation by highly decorated director in Francis Ford Coppola. You've got incredible casting. It's basically like it almost is like watching theatre, you know what I mean, in terms of some of the actors you've got into it, some of the costumes that you've got, and just the kind of grandiose of the film. It's gothic horror personified, and you've got elements of romance there, so it's not kind of a typical horror film. I know it predates the story predates a lot of horror films.
Yeah.
But it's just such a well done adaptation of it that I genuinely think you could find people who aren't into horror films that wouldn't usually watch horror films might go to the cinema to watch this because of the actors who are in it, because of how it looks, and because of what it is effectively, you know?
Yeah.
I just think it's such an incredible film, you know?
Right. I'm going to come with a bang here, is the fact that I've seen this film once and I hated it. I think that
let's end this recording.
I think that I found it to be cheesy and corny. I didn't find it scary in the least. I found Gary Oldman to be chewing the scenery like crazy. Keanu Reeves was bad either way. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins, I thought was the set pieces. Yes, looks beautiful. I didn't like the design of Dracula. I know it's the way it's described in the book. I couldn't get on with this film. I was doing it for film studies. I read the book and I could see that it was faithful, but there was something in the original that had a gothic, dark intensity that I didn't find at all in this film. Huh. I've seen it once though, so I will say I'm happy to reevaluate and rewatch, and we will do an episode to rewatch and reevaluate. That's why I was even leading. I was like, maybe if I saw it in the cinema, maybe I would completely change my perspective on it. So I am considering actually going to the cinema while it's out to actually see it. I believe they're playing that, and they're also playing Lost Boys, which I've never seen. Lost Boys, so I was like, oh, see it first time in the cinema. That sounds good. But no, I just don't remember having any fond memories of it at all. It's been. I believe it's almost 10 years now since I've watched it. So it's a long time. But I just remember being like, I remember this is meant to be really good. And I heard Gary Oldman's amazing. And I just remember leaving being like, I was bored. I was really bored of that. Like, it is. And going with, my other like next picks and stuff like that. It's just, to be fair, I didn't choose based on whether I absolutely loved or adored the films. Like the other two, I do really like them, but I didn't actually choose it based on purely like whether I liked them or not. But yeah, this one I don't know. It just wasn't for me. But it might be for me. I'll have to revisit it. Maybe I've matured in that way.
You don't like them, but then you try them, and as you get older, you like them.
Yeah, maybe I'm just not keen. Maybe I've read it. Maybe I'm just not as keen on the original kind of play of Dracula kind of thing. The original Mary Shelley's version. I don't know, but
Mary Shelley.
I remember liking the book. Mary Shelley?
Bram Stoker.
Bram Stoker. Yeah, where did Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? Yeah, I don't know where that came from there. Bram Stoker, but yeah, I don't know.
First, fair enough.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I love that one, but I also know the adaptation of that. That's not. I don't think that was very good.
That's the Kenneth Branagh.
The Kenneth Branagh one.
I don't really know. Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro. Yeah, it's okay, but it's a bit bad.
I mean, but that's I guess the beauty.
And me coming in with a classic film that's being celebrated like 30 years later. Now me thinking about the film that I'm about to mention is like. You have every right to tear that one down because of what it is.
Well, before we get on to that, I guess that's the beauty of films is we don't have to have it. I see a lot of the times online you see like people having opinions and then somebody has another opinion and it just they just can't have a civil conversation about it. Please forward them to this episode.
Yes, I was going to say, we can have a civil conversation. We don't have time for a We will bore the listeners for a long time in discussing those points. But also, I also have to say that I'm not going to say I'm like definitely certain that is my true answer because I haven't revisited it in so. I've only seen it once, revisited it in a long time. Fuck knows, I watched it in uni, so I could have been drunk half of the film. I don't know.
So
I could have been waiting to go off and do something else.
As soon as we stop recording, I'll be strangling you like Homer
Simpson. He'll beat me.
All right, man. Let's hear your one.
Okay, so I avoided a classic and another classic. So I have two classic films that are not fully horror but have to choose this film.
Okay.
And as I said, I'm not saying that this is a good film. Alien versus Predator.
Oh, banger.
I decided that Alien versus Predator, this links back to me remembering the fact that I was snuck in when I was underage to see Alien versus Predator, just about underage. I think it was like 14, it was a 50. But I remember being snuck in and just thinking that Alien versus Predator at that time, I have revisited it since. So anyone going, oh, that's not that good. I'll admit. Rewatching, it's not amazing, but for the nostalgia part of it, and if you're someone who's not into horror, not into sci-fi horror anyway, I'd almost say like I wouldn't actually be pushing you towards Alien. I think it's slightly slower. So
It is.
I might push you towards Aliens.
Yeah, maybe Aliens.
But there's a little bit more horror in there that you might not love. But there's just something fun that was about this film. That, bringing the two characters together. But there's also that weird kind of early 2000s tameness about it. You know what I mean? It's Paul W.S. Anderson. So you know what I mean with that tameness. It's like Resident Evil, where there's an odd kind of... The first one, no. But in the sequels, you tended to get... It wasn't like full-on gore, you know what I mean? It wasn't full-on... Like, that wasn't a full-on zombie film. This wasn't Predator and Alien, that they're full-on bloody thirstiousness. You know what I mean? They were... The aliens were... The Predator was almost used as... Because he had more human-like to him. He's used as kind of the character that they kind of look at, the character that they turn to kind of the good slightly good. Whereas the aliens are just full-on fuckers that just try to kill you, which is exactly what the aliens should be.
That's what they should be.
This is what... See, I've done a nice thing here because all of my films, Happy Death Day, only got a second film. Zombieland only got a second film. Alien vs. Predator only got a second film. But unlike the other two, where I said you could watch the other two and you'll have fun, don't fucking watch the second one. It's a pile of shit. But this one has a weird... at least this one is like a full-on sci-fi. You know, they're in this giant pyramid. You get a whole like backstory at the beginning about the fact that the predators were these mighty creatures of the land, even implying they were as part of our planet at one point, where they were like within the Egyptians, that they were mighty leaders, and they always came down to Earth for search for the, the greatest foes and stuff like that. And they would battle them in Egypt in these kind of, and it adds this whole background. Yeah, it is cool. You know what I mean? For the first one, as much as I would, say Paul W.S. Anderson has many problems, and he does with character and, script and things like that. Both character and script, not good and not great in this film. But there is something here which he has in some of the action scenes, and there are some likable characters. I think his name's Ewan Bremner, and he's kind of the Scottish side guy. And I remember being so disappointed when he just suddenly gets like pulled up to the ceiling. And that one was actually, there was something scarier about that one, purely because it was actually a very sudden like shit. Yeah. But it was also, he was one of the few characters I think you kind of could warm to in the film. Yeah. So when he was suddenly taken, that's not actually, I think we see him later on when he's on the wall with he's got one growing inside of him kind of thing.
I haven't actually seen this film for many years. I might watch it tonight. But there was the two scenes that really stuck out for me, for two completely different reasons. The first one is when the characters, I can't remember what exactly happens, but they go into the sacrificial chamber where the sacrifices would lie on the table and the alien eggs would come up. Yeah. And I think they get knocked out or something happens. And then they ended up getting attacked by the aliens. And there's a girl with short hair in it. And I always remember her saying, a gun is like a condom. I'd rather need it. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And I always remember that because I was like 14. I was like, fuck yeah. And then the other scene, I think, is when Predator is going towards Lance Henriksen. And he scans his lungs and finds out that his lungs are fucked. So it doesn't kill him. And funnily enough, at work, like 2 or 3 days ago, I went for a wee, and when your mind just wanders. And I was thinking, Predator wouldn't kill me because I have asthma and I've got a kidney disease. So he'd scan me and find this, and I would be deemed unworthy, which could be good because, like, Lance Henriksen then tries to take the Predator on. I am not a feeble old man, so maybe I can use my.
He still ends up dead, though, doesn't he?
Because he tries to take him on and he kills him.
But so if Predator walked into the room right now, basically you'd be fine and he'd rip my spine.
He'd kill you.
I don't think I've got anything I know of.
No.
Not right now. I might be down dead tomorrow. But right now, as far as I'm fine. So he'll rip my spine out in front of you and leave me dead here.
And then he will scan me and be like, no, he's not worthy. And that is when I use it to scan the room, do an ocular pat down. I'll find out what he's got. And then I, take his blade, kill him. And then the Predator comes and he's like, you killed one of us. We give you the gun that we gave Danny Glover. And it all links up.
It all links up in an amazing way.
Yeah.
And there we go.
But this film is, it's fun. There, it's got light elements. And not only that, but it has some good kind of action, horror, sci-fi icons. So somebody could watch this and be like, actually, I wouldn't mind watching Alien or Aliens.
This is where I kind of came from this film. I was like, no, I'm not saying in any way that this is the best of a Predator or the Alien franchise in any way. It's far down there. You know, I mean, this is much closer to Alien Resurrection or well, no, I think all the Predators are probably better than this film. Yeah. But it's from the fact that I think that this one is easily accessible for someone who's never kind of watched these films. Then this is like it's at its tamest, yes, in many ways for both of the characters. But you kind of watch it and there's a fun about it that I think would then this film makes it more accessible for you to then go and watch Alien and Aliens or Predator. You know what I mean? I feel like it's more, you can draw yourself into it in that way kind of thing. So I just think there is something about, you know, it just also popped into mind, to be fair. How the fuck is Mila Djokovic not in this film?
I don't know.
I don't know how that happened. Isn't she just basically signed into every film that he makes by this point?
Pretty much.
You know, I don't think there was a film that he's made since, like, apart from this film, since the first Resident Evil, where she hasn't been in it. No. So that just blew my mind. But yeah, you have the whole ending. I like the whole, you know, you have the Queen Mother kind of at the end, of the aliens, and we get this kind of battle where they have to join forces with the Predator. It's much more, in many ways, it is much more of an entertainment action sci-fi film than it is a horror, but it has enough horror elements that it'll kind of, if you can watch this, then there's a few other horrors you can kind of touch on, you know, and get through.
Okay, I mean, off the back of Aliens versus Predator, I was going to go for a very similar film in Van Helsing. I was thinking, could be a choice because it's, you know, it's action horror. You've got a lot of introduction to classic creatures in, you know, the werewolf, Frankenstein,
in the Universal,
in the Universal monsters. You've got the sexual man, Hugh Jackman, in there. You know, you've got all of these fun characters. But then I thought, well, actually, I've kind of done 2 fun films, so I thought maybe I'll try something a bit more like serious and a bit more kind of highbrow as a recommendation. You know,
that's what as I said, I have the highbrow ones, but I have took out the highbrow ones because Happy Death Day, Zombieland, and Alien vs Predator, it seemed like they all fit together in this kind of entertainment horror kind of thing that I would kind of put it in. That it's not going to be the top of anyone's gore list, it's not going to be the scariest of any of them, but all of them are kind of easy, tame going, of our kind of youth growing up kind of time, that we kind of would have been some of our like touch on ones where, you know, we would have been like, we're proper into watching this kind of thing.
So what didn't make the list?
What didn't make the list? My fancier films were Rear Window, Hitchcock,
a banger.
It's not full on horror; it's a suspenseful kind of film. It's almost more full on suspense, and there aren't really many horror elements at all. But there is a slow burning creepiness about it that kind of is like really fantastic. When I watched it, that I loved, and I love some of the Hitchcock films, and that one and like Vertigo, which again I'd say is more of a thriller than a horror, but you know, and this one verges on that, but there's something I enjoyed about that. Going more towards the serious, dark, but draw you in with certain graphic horror moments. Seven,
that was a good one.
But I went away from that because I started to think, I don't know, like if you like, there are people that like crime stories but don't like horror, so they like to hear about the kind of thing, but they don't want the blood and the gore of it, but they like to hear these like true crimes. And I thought for those kind of people, Seven is kind of, that would be to bring you in. And it's also, it's not as full on as say Saw or these kind of body horror ones, but it has the first like inklings of like liking those kind of films maybe that would draw you into that era. And plus it's got Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman.
And I actually
and a head in a box.
I actually read I watched a video on TikTok, and there's a theory that Morgan Freeman's character was the one who sold the information to John Doe, Kevin Spacey's character.
Interesting.
I'll send it to you, but it when you watch it, it really does make sense, because there's stuff like, I mean, this is going to be spoilers for it, but there's stuff in the film where Morgan Freeman says that, you know, people will sell stories to journalists for extra money. And then when John Doe first reveals himself, he says, "I know you," to Morgan Freeman's character. When we find out, obviously, that I was about to say Morgan Freeman's wife. Brad Pitt's wife is pregnant, and the only person he's told is Morgan Freeman. However, John Doe knows that she's pregnant and knows who his wife is. Yeah, he did colour her. I don't think she's that far to be gross. And there's some looks are exchanged between them, and when John Doe goes to say certain things, that's when Morgan Freeman's character hits him and stuff. I'll send the videos. It's really interesting.
Well, Seven is another one that we should do at some point. It's a great film, and it's also this like, and I can see the link. I can see what you're talking about. Some of those fairies and some of them in there. Although it would destroy the complete whole idea of him being like the once good man to the guy who's going to completely break his. It does ruin the balance of
a little bit. Yeah, but maybe that's it. Maybe the subtlety is that he didn't realize.
Yeah,
I'll send it to you
within one of the sins.
Yeah. And the last one that didn't make it for me, but I was very close to putting it in, was Silence of the Lambs. Again, it's another classic.
Yeah,
more in that thriller kind of realm, but I'd say thriller is horror anyway.
Yeah,
but we've got some amazing performances, great mystery, and just incredible scenes, incredible acting. And again, it's not overly bloody, but it has some extremely
there's a dark depth, there's a lingering suspense that kind of is horrific at times, and there's some horrific parts to it as well, including Hopkins.
Thank you for joining us on this spooky day for our beginner's guide to horror films. If you have enjoyed the episode, then come and let us know what you thought of it, and let us know some of your beginner's guides horror films, what you often recommend to people. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at CMDH Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you get the episodes as soon as they're released. Go and join us by the campfire for the Campfire special, and we will see you next week.
Happy Halloween.